Coming up on Talking Points, President Biden's student loan forgiveness program blocked by a federal court. We'll have more on who will be affected.
Plus, after 44 days, Liz Truss has resigned as the British Prime Minister. We'll have more on the impacts of the decision and what the future of the British government looks like.
Plus, Russia's war on Ukraine reaches the 8-month mark. We'll tell you how the war has been changing throughout the past few days. Talking Points starts right now. Hey, welcome into Talking Points and happy Diwali to all those celebrating. I'm Chilekasi, Adele.
And I'm Teagan Brown. We have a lot to discuss tonight, but let's start with the latest news from the January 6th insurrection. The House committee investigating the insurrection will soon submit its final reports. But before its conclusions are published, they're asking former President Donald Trump to give his side of the story first.
On Friday, it was announced that the committee is subpoenaing Trump to testify before the committee next month and submit documents for review. Talking Points analyst Ericka Love joins us in studio to explain more on the significance of this historic action. Ericka.
Thanks, Chile. After Friday's subpoena to President Donald Trump, the former president has only 9 days to provide the requested documents and only 13 days to decide to testify in front of the committee. Through the subpoena, the committee is asking Trump to produce an extensive list of documents and communications, including phone calls, texts, encrypted messages, and emails related to nearly every aspect of his alleged effort to invalidate the 2020 election. In addition to the documents, the panel has also asked the former president to inform the committee if he intends to invoke his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. Trump has reportedly said to his aides in private that he is weighing whether to testify, but only under the condition that it be live and on television. This would prevent the committee from controlling what gets seen by the public. Right now, the committee is on thin ice because Trump's lawyers could argue that there is no Supreme Court precedent that says whether Congress has the power to compel former presidents to testify against their will about their actions in office.
Now, Erica, as of today, there are only 2 months before the committee shuts down, and this comes just as it's meant to produce a massive report laying out its findings. It's unclear what exactly from this report. However, the Justice Department is already conducting a inquiry into Trump and his White House aides and how they may have played a role in trying to overturn the 2020 election. I'll let you continue on.
Yeah, so, with this, there have been several presidents already who have who've been called to speak in front of Congress to speak to different investigations and to testify. This is special. Liz Cheney is calling on President Trump. She wants answers. She's hoping for these specific answers. But the reason this is a significant action on behalf of the committee is because, like I said, only several presidents have come before, some voluntary, some involuntary. But in the past, Mr. Trump has also invoked his executive privilege to not have White House documents brought before the committee, and the Supreme Court ruled against him. So documents are very different than bringing him in person and having him testify, and that's why this is very significant.
Ericka, there were other people asked to testify within Trump's inner circle. Can you explain how the committee's proceedings are impacting other Republican politicians across the country?
Well, first, we have Senator Lindsey Graham, and then we have another White House aide very close to Trump, Rudy Giuliani, both of them having to show up in Atlanta to speak on behalf of how they were involved with January 6th, but also how they may have been involved in trying to pressure and overturn the election in Georgia, specifically in Atlanta. So they may have to show up for a grand jury in that way. But you also have Steve Bannon, who was convicted on Friday of contempt of Congress for not showing up after being subpoenaed by the January 6th committee. And because of that, he's going to have to pay $6,500 and serve 4 months in jail. So this is definitely a developing issue, and we're going to see a lot affecting the midterms in the coming weeks.
And we'll keep watching it. Talking Points analyst Ericka Love, thank you. The focus of New York's governor's race shifting towards public safety. Polls show the race tightening between incumbent Governor Kathy Hochul and her Republican challenger, Congressman Lee Zeldin. Hochul touted the state's red flag gun laws in a press conference with State Attorney General Letitia James today. These laws were strengthened after the mass shooting at the Buffalo Tops over the summer. Crime has consistently been a top concern for voters in the state, according to polls. It's been a main focus of Zeldin's campaign as well. The two candidates will face off in their only debate tomorrow night. And the Georgia grand jury is investigating potential criminal interference in the 2020 election by former President Donald Trump and his allies. And that's hit a Supreme Court roadblock today. Justice Clarence Thomas blocked their subpoena for testimony by South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham about his efforts to meddle in the state's presidential vote count. Georgia's Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger told the Washington Post that Graham called him on the phone 10 days after the election to ask if he could toss out all mail ballots in certain counties.
Graham's attorneys say his phone call to Raffensperger is protected by a constitutional clause protecting members of Congress from legal risk for comments related to legislative business. But Democrats have criticized the decision by Justice Thomas, saying he has a conflict of interest in the case given his wife is also under investigation for her encouragement of efforts to overturn Trump's loss.
And earlier today, Attorney General Merrick Garland announcing federal charges against 13 people for trying to influence the United States to benefit their own country.
Here's what we know at this hour. There are 7 Chinese nationals that were accused of participating in a scheme to return a Chinese national living in America back home. 2 Chinese intelligence officers were charged with attempting to obstruct a criminal prosecution in New York. And 4 Chinese nationals were charged for allegedly taking part in a long-running intelligence campaign targeting U.S. individuals to become agents of China.
Now to another investigation surrounding former President Donald Trump. The Washington Post reporting classified documents found in Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate contained very sensitive material.
Those documents included information about Iran's missile program and U.S. intelligence work aimed at China, according to the report. Here with more details about the papers and what this means for Trump and the investigation is Talking Points analyst Anna Salewycz. Anna. So, Anna, if these reports are true, the FBI and Justice Department are certainly building a hefty case against Trump. What type of trouble is Trump facing here?
It's not looking very good for Trump. So U.S. intelligence is currently trying to just assess the risks that would come if the documents that were stored in Mar-a-Lago were exposed. Now, Mar-a-Lago is a private club and it has a lot of guests and staffs and a lot of people coming through, and it's just not as secure as the highly guarded government buildings these classified documents should have been stored in. A lot of consequences would have come if the highly classified information, regarding Iran and China was to be exposed. A consequence that could have come of this is that just U.S. intelligence gathering methods would be exposed and compromised, and the people that were gathering this information would have been put in danger. It also, a lot of countries could have used this information for their own benefit or even just used it to retaliate against the U.S. Now, because these documents are so sensitive, they pose really heavy, great risks, and that's just not going to look very good for Trump in the long run, and it just may, it could potentially increase the likelihood that he does get charged in the investigation.
Anna, how is the former president responding to these reports and these legal claims?
So Trump does what he usually does. He took to his Truth Social platform to post something came directly after the Washington Post published their article. He actually claimed that the FBI and the National Archives, the NRA, he claimed that they were framing him by trying to plant things into the documents and take things out of them. He said, quote, "The FBI and the Department of Justice are now leaking nonstop on the document hoax to the fake news." Now, these posts are probably not going to have a direct impact in his investigation, but it's not going to look very good for him if, he keeps on denying these things and does get charged in the long run.
Talking Points analyst Anna Salewycz, thank you so much. And now to a major battle between Republicans and the Biden administration. The 8th Circuit of Appeals temporarily blocking President Joe Biden's student loan forgiveness program. Talking Points analyst Adriana Haydarova is here to discuss how this change will pronounce itself in the coming days. Adriana.
In August, President Joe Biden proposed a student relief plan that would cancel a portion of student loan debt for certain eligible Americans. Biden asserted that those who make under $125,000 would receive aid from $10,000 up to $20,000 in forgiveness. Since then, many Republican-led states joining in mass opposition. The 8th Circuit of Appeals temporarily blocked the plan from fully taking into effect. If it weren't for the sudden halt, millions of Americans would have potentially had some of their student debt cleared by January of 2023. The lawsuit from the 6 states is one of the legal challenges that Biden's team currently faces, as well as economical feasibility of his plan. Professionals estimate that the student loan relief would accumulate over $400 billion over the next couple of decades, which may take an unprecedented turn in the education system, a turn that some Republicans argue will be economically unwise.
So, Adriana, last Friday, the federal appeals court temporarily froze President Biden's student loan forgiveness program. What's the status of the plan at this hour?
Well, with 6 Republican-led states pushing against Biden's plan, we can see that this is a tug-of-war situation. It's lawsuits against lawsuits. For example, on Thursday, a Republican-led state took to court to demonstrate that Biden's plan demonstrates harm. And even though the judge ruled that the case lacks standing, we can still see how that rippled into the plan being paused in the first place.
And Adriana, the issue of student loan forgiveness has actually become a major topic amid the upcoming midterm election. How exactly are Republicans attacking the plan, and how are Democrats out here defending it?
Well, the debate really comes here from the Higher Education Opportunities Act for Students, which permitted the Secretary of Education to waive debt for borrowers in times of national emergency. And many Republicans are arguing that COVID-19 is no longer a national emergency as it was once before. Therefore, Biden has no legal grounds to carry out his plan.
Adriana, thank you so much. And coming up on Talking Points, Ukraine has seen power outages across the country after missile attacks from the Russian military. We'll discuss how this could impact the rest of the war. This and more in 90 seconds. Look.
Hey, welcome back to Talking Points. Ukraine is struggling with power shortages amid recent airstrikes by Russian drones. Breaking down where the conflict stands between Russia and Ukraine is Talking Points analyst Dominic Chiappone. Dominic.
Thanks, Chilekasi. In recent weeks, the Ukrainian military has continued to push Russian forces back east towards the Russian border. But as of now, Ukraine faces a humanitarian crisis amid recent Russian attacks. 2 days ago on Saturday, Russia launched missile strikes against Ukraine's power and heating systems. According to the New York Times, Ukrainian officials confirmed missile strikes in at least 6 regions across Ukraine, with the barrage aimed at, quote, critical civilian infrastructure, unquote. Ukrainian officials also said that as much as 30% of Ukraine's power plants have been or are damaged. Bombings across Ukraine by Russia are at its highest point since the invasion began back on February 24th. Now, despite recent advances, Ukrainian society is on the brink of collapse. Ukrainian ambassador to the United Nations, Chilekasi, made that point clear at a recent speech to the UN. Take a listen.
The entire world has once again seen the true face of the terrorist state that kills our people. Suffering defeats on the battlefield, Russia takes it out on the peaceful residents of Ukrainian cities.
Russian strikes against Ukraine come as Ukraine continues to regain territory from Russia's invasion. Ukrainian forces have gained as many square miles in a month and a half than Russia has in 8 months. As you can see on this map, Ukraine continues to push Russian forces back towards the Russian border, launching counterattacks in the northeast Kharkiv province and southeast towards the Kherson province. Now, on the Russian side of conflict, Russia continues to struggle with recent military defeats. Ukraine is on the brink of reclaiming the Kherson province, which Russia announced it was annexing earlier this month. An increase in Russian defeats has led to an increased desperation by both President Putin and Russian military forces. Just recently, Ukrainian officials have warned against a potential Russian attack against a hydroelectric dam. This comes after Russia struck the capital city of Kyiv and other Ukrainian cities using Iran-made drones. Yesterday, Russian Defense Secretary Sergei Shoigu accused Ukraine of preparing attacks using dirty bombs and bioweapons. Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons back in 1994 in exchange for Russia guaranteeing it would not invade Ukraine. And earlier this month, President Putin called for a partial mobilization of 300,000 Russian citizens, sparking protests and at least 1,000 arrests across Russia. Now, over the weekend, Shoigu met with U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin and U.K. Secretary Ben Wallace in separate calls. Both the U.S. and the U.K. reaffirmed that communication is critical with Russia, but both Austin and Wallace called Russia's war against Ukraine unlawful and unjustified. Recent developments show that Ukraine's military strategy of exhaustion has crippled Russian morale and given them an opportunity to reclaim sovereignty. Meanwhile, time is not on the side of the Russians as this conflict continues to drag on. As always, we'll have the latest updates on the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Chilekasi and Teagan, back to you guys.
Dominic Chiappone, thank you so much. And a month and a half after stepping into her position as the UK Prime Minister, Liz Truss has resigned. And now someone else will step in hopes that they can have a more positive outcome. Talking Points analyst Katie Fongvongsa is here to discuss a new era. Katie.
After a record-breaking 44 days in office, Liz Truss resigned as a Prime Minister of Great Britain. Her term was short-lived, and Truss attempted to find a solution for the country's energy and inflation crisis. This comes from the ongoing war between Ukraine and Russia, which has diminished the UK supply. Truss had little support in her goals for the tax budget, which she mentions in her last statement.
We delivered on energy bills and on cutting national insurance. And we set out a vision for a low-tax, high-growth economy that would take advantage of the freedoms of Brexit. I recognise, though, given the situation, I cannot deliver the mandate on which I was elected by the Conservative Party.
Truss replaced the previous finance minister with Chancellor Jeremy Hunt. He has changed the mini budget to show promising investments and postponed the rate of income taxes to save the UK up to £32 million. Hunt said in a statement, "It is a deeply held conservative value that people should keep more of the money they earn. This is because household bills and the cost of food are hitting the pockets of the British harshly as Parliament is planning for winter. The UK is hoping to have enough to stockpile and provide at a reasonable price until April of 2023. While combating inflation, Truss's plan made the pound rise, which made matters worse and led to Hunt reversing the damage. The new elect must address the economic crisis that Truss failed to redesign, along with gaining or keeping popularity among members of the Parliament."
The 1922 committee met this morning and voted Conservative Party leader Rishi Sunak into office as the next British PM. He will be the first Asian PM, along with being one of the youngest. The transition in leadership is set to occur sometime this week. Chile Teagan, back to you.
Katie Fongvongsa, thank you so much. And coming up on Talking Points, the midterm elections are just a few weeks away. We have some of the latest on the most crucial races across the country.
Did you hear about the pony with a sore throat? He was a little horse. Can I tell you a cat joke? Just kidding. Why couldn't the why was the basketball court all wet? Why? Because the players kept dribbling all over it. Where do cats go on vacation? New York.
Welcome back to Talking Points. The midterms are just 2 weeks away, and many of the Senate races are getting closer by the day.
Boy, oh boy, Talking Points analyst Jake Morel in studio with polling updates on some of the most impactful Senate races. Jake.
Teagan and Chile, we're going to dive right in here with the Pennsylvania Senate race, and this is one we've been keeping a close eye on in the CitrusTV studio for the entirety of the semester so far, and for good reason. Fetterman and Oz have not pulled any punches on each other in this campaign, and as you can see, Fetterman opened up this campaign with about a 6-point lead there, but as time goes on, you see those lines get a little bit closer, and Oz has cut the lead to only 2 points going into the election now here in just a couple weeks, so definitely a race that Republicans want to pull off an upset there in Pennsylvania, especially because it is a swing state. Now, speaking of those states that they're looking to pull off upsets, let's look at the Ohio Senate race, Tim Ryan versus J.D. Vance. Now, this is a race we've been keeping an eye on as well. It's been one of the closest Senate races that we've seen in these midterms. If you take a look, Tim Ryan has had a 2-point lead on J.D. Vance for the entirety of this race until just a couple days ago when Vance actually jumped ahead in the polling by 1 point. So Vance actually leading Ryan, a little bit surprising to a lot of people in Ohio as Tim Ryan's campaign has had a lot more funding and he's been on the ground with Ohioans a lot more, but seemingly to no avail as he is losing by 1 point right now. But let's take a look at Wisconsin too. Speaking of surprises, Mandela Barnes was leading Ron Johnson by 5.5 points in August at the beginning of this race, but Johnson has come back. And one thing with Johnson, he's been very outspoken against Biden on Social Security as well as student loans. And you can see right when he's outspoken on those issues in September and October right there, his popularity grows in Wisconsin, and now he's enjoying about a 3.5 point lead in that race. And speaking of states that Republicans want to keep control of, let's now take a look at Florida, our final race that we'll talk about here. Val Demings versus Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio opened this race with a 6-point lead. Demings cut it to 4 in September, and it's stayed there since. Now, these two had a debate in Florida last week, and these polling numbers can be a little bit delayed, but it did not seem to affect how Floridians felt about the race, as Rubio is still up by about 4 points there. Republicans hoping to hang on to that race in Florida. Now, we'll have all these results and analysis of the Senate races and also the governor races when we hold our election special here in the CitrusTV studio at 10 p.m. on November 8th. That is Election Day. Don't miss it. We'll bring all of those results and analysis to you. But not just about the Senate races. We're also going to talk about the governor races. And joining me now in studio is Talking Points analyst Noah Gutfleisch. Now, Noah, let's get right into it. Let's start with Pennsylvania, a state that we just talked about with the Senate race. Despite being a state that was only decided by 1 point in 2020, Democrat Josh Shapiro is the clear favorite for the governor's race. Why is a state that's so close in so many other races such a blowout in this governor race so far?
Well, there are many reasons why. Many think that it's because of Mastriano's extreme policies on abortion, where he supports no exceptions. Also could just be that he continuously denies that the 2020 presidential election in Pennsylvania was actually won by Biden. But really the biggest issue is just funding and name recognition, really. The biggest, Mastriano has really not gotten money from the Republican Governors Association and really has not got his name out there, which is the biggest issue, I feel, for his campaign and why he is behind so far.
And Noah, you talk about name recognition there. That's a great point because we just looked at that Senate race between Oz and Fetterman, and Oz is actually leading that now. So a little bit surprising that we would see Mastriano losing by that much, but name recognition definitely a big part of that Pennsylvania governor race. Now let's move down to Arizona. Republican Kari Lake and Democrat Katie Hobbs have run very different campaigns, but they're still very close heading into the election. Tell us a little bit about this race so far.
Well, they're two very different campaigns. Kari Lake has ran a very Trump-style aggressive campaign, similar to actually how Trump ran his campaign in 2016. And she is a very ardent supporter of Trump, and has continuously denied that that Biden has won the election in Arizona in 2020. And Katie Hobbs has been kind of quiet. She declined to debate Lake, and has not really campaigned too much.
Interesting point there in Arizona about election denial. They had a lot of drama following the 2020 election about election fraud claims in Arizona. So interesting to see still a lot of people supporting Kari Lake in that state. But we're going to finish up here with a prediction. The Nevada governor race has been one of the closest races in these midterms. And Republican Joe Lombardo actually has recently taken the lead. Will he be able to hold on to this 2-point lead and unseat Sisolak?
Well, you see, Nevada is a very interesting state where most polls technically are usually overestimate Democrats nationwide. Nevada, that does not happen. Actually, they underestimate Democrats usually, as Steve Sisolak actually in 2016 was losing, and he managed to win by 4 points. So I think that he will actually win again and have a second term.
Definitely a race to keep an eye on. Noah Gutfleisch, thank you so much. Coming up on Talking Points, President Joe Biden will be in Syracuse on Thursday. We'll tell you why after the break. Stick with us.
I see you mobbing over her. Let's go. Let's mob. Let's crawl. Let's crawl. Let's crawl. Hey, yo, we mobbing. Come on, girl. Let's crawl. Hey, yo, let's crawl. Hey, yo, let's crawl. Hey, let's crawl. Hey, yo, let's crawl.
Hey, welcome back to Talking Points. President Joe Biden expected to visit Onondaga County on Thursday. The news of Biden's visit comes on the heels of the $100 billion Micron deal to build a chip manufacturing plant in Clay.
Biden accepted the opportunity to visit from Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and New York Governor Kathy Hochul. This will be the first time Biden will be in the Syracuse area since he took office as president last year. And Chile, since we know that Governor Hochul made the announcement just down the street from SU at the NVRC, it makes you wonder if President Biden is going to travel there as well to the Hill, or even if he's going to go to Clay where the plant is going to be built.
And you mentioned Governor Kathy Hochul there. I think one of the interesting storylines here, President Biden has not officially endorsed Kathy Hochul yet. We saw President Trump last week endorse Lee Zeldin, so I wonder if that's going to be part of the trip on Thursday as well.
Yeah, and a number of voters don't even recognize Hochul by name right now, so it's the question of if Biden gives her that endorsement when he's here on Thursday, will it push her forward at all in the polls, and especially after tomorrow's debate?
Yeah, and some people are going to be watching to see whether it's a little bit too little, too late. You know, the polls have tightened in the recent weeks, so we really don't know what's going to come out there. And that's all the time we have for you on this episode of Talking Points. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at CitrusTV News.
Like us on Facebook as well. My name is Teagan Brown. Have a great night, Syracuse. We also have an election special before I forget, November 8th, 10 p.m. Tune in.